Hey, what's up, you guys? It is Kat, and today we have our esteemed guest again, Mr. Ed Metera. Now, Mr. Ed Metera, is, as you can recall, is a project management professional and advocate in the process modeling and project management area. And today we're going to dive into a special topic which he calls the process, and it's from his book and world of process modeling advisor. Again, processmodelingadvisor.com is where you would find more information on this. But today, what we thought we would chat about is specifically what a trusted advisor would need when embarking on a consulting engagement. Okay. Now in this podcast, as you know, when we when we talk about or refer to consultants, we mean them from various different perspectives. So either you can be an external consultant who advises your clients in terms of your customer organizations, or you can be an internal consultant where you advise different various business areas within your organization, or you can also be a leader in your organization that would, as you can imagine, would be called upon at various different points in time to advise, to be that trusted advisor and to guide your business area or your organization through to fruition of some sort. Right. So welcome again, Ed. We're so excited to have you. I know that I thoroughly enjoyed our previous conversation. So I was so excited to be able to, chat with you again upon this particular topic in which both of us are very passionate.
Thank you, Kat. Thanks for inviting me back. Yeah, so what I'd like to do today is go through this topic, which actually is written up as an article at processmodelingadvisor.com, and its original audience would have been business analysts who of course do process modeling. But in the grander scheme of things, uh, a business analyst, when they engage on a project and they're providing their services to a project, me being a project manager, I might have certain expectations on what the BA should be doing and so on. There's a concept called business analysis planning, and a certified business analyst, according to the International Institute of Business Analysis, actually goes through a process of establishing a business analysis plan. Now, if you think of yourself as a trusted advisor coming to a project or an engagement of some kind, you can also apply the same planning thoughts and examine the same kind of dynamics that you're about to encounter with your client, with your project team, that a BA would for their project. So
Okay.
today I'd like
So
to sort of take us through that and see how it might work for you.
perfect, perfect. Before we get into that, can we sort of level set on the role of a business analyst on a project? On some clients of ours, actually, in this particular organization, they've actually never had business analysts before, and so the concept of business analysis was quite foreign to them. So, can you dive into a little bit about what a business analyst would do on a project?
And from our previous conversation, you know that I'm product oriented. So as a project manager and starting off on a new project, whatever its scope might be, whatever its objectives might be, I establish a plan of what you called micro products, but basically they are deliverables that will be provided and produced through the life cycle of the project that get us to the end goal. And so I think of the product. So, what does a business analyst do? A business analyst has specialized skills that enable them to produce certain types of products that add value to our project. Some examples of products that a BA may be responsible for, perhaps, are a business case, perhaps even going before that, a market scan. Once the business case is written, they might participate in a requirement specification. They might participate in testing. They might participate even in organizational change management. And when you think of a business analyst, think of it as a role. It's not a person. Of course, many people have that as a profession or skill, but you might be in an organization where you're not that large and you don't have one person for each of these roles. So at some point, I might take my project manager hat off and put my business analyst hat on and apply the skills that a BA should apply to perhaps preparing a business case, developing some requirements, maybe a test plan, change management plan, executing those plans. And typically, that's what a business analyst could do. But it doesn't have to
Okay.
be a person.
Right.
Often it is in a large organization, but it might just be playing that role and having the skill to elicit and document and produce that artifact for that project.
Okay. And why would like what is the benefit to I mean, I'm sort of asking the obvious, but I feel like um, I would like you to spell out the benefits of having a business analyst on a project or like business analysis in the form of the business case. Like, why do we need these? Why do we have to go through this rigor to have a business case and a market scan and these requirements? Like, why is that necessary on for a successful project?
Well, in many organizations, there's competition for what's important to spend money
Mm,
on in
mm,
terms of technology and enhancements and changes. And
mhm,
so, it's not just a wink and a nod between a couple of executives in an elevator. There are competing demands, for example, for capital expenditure or money,
mm,
right? So should we do this even?
right.
That's where something like a business case comes in. How much should we fund this project with? That's where something like a project plan comes in. What is the scope? Which, by the way, project plan probably is something that project manager does. But
Mhm,
what is the scope of this? What are we going to change? It tells us what are our requirements to implement, and also it also explains why is it going to cost this much. So
right.
you can formally gather, elicit, document requirements. In the case of what we talked about with respect to process modeling, one of the skills of a BA, there might be a project underway to improve some form of operations or develop requirements for some software, et cetera. And that's where you want it to be fairly rigorous in terms
Mm,
of having the skill to elicit what requirements there are and to be able to document them so they can be readily and jointly communicated among project team members as we roll forward in the life cycle. So it's a
I love that
specialized skill.
answer.
It's a specialized skill, you know.
Right. Right. Thank you for sharing that because I feel like in a lot of projects, like they start off with really, really great intentions, and then you have the oh, but what about this? Oh, but what about this? And this is your system to ensure that all of that structure, you remain true to your original intention of the project.
Without spending too much more time on what a business analyst does, I want to explain yesterday afternoon, literally, I was on a call with our project's business analyst, and we're developing some new software and enhancements to other enterprise systems that are an integrated solution. So we finally had uh, a walkthrough of actually the design of part of the solution, but they were mapped directly to the requirements that the business analyst had elicited, the requirements for what data is going to need to be utilized, what functions or workflows are going to be changed, and then the development team or the designer of the software basically came back and said, for each, these were the requirements. We're going to walk through the functional design and where the changes are going to be made in these systems. The other attendees, besides the project manager who wanted to know what are we changing and why is it going to cost so much and do I understand what I'm going to have to get people to implement, we had the change management or organizational change management resource on the project. So she could understand where the impacts will be in the business and then go forward with her work to prepare plans to make those changes, training, education, that kind of thing. We had
Amazing.
the quality assurance expert on the call so they could understand what is the scope of the requirements that I'm actually going to test the solution to meet.
Hmm.
Um, uh, and we had some other related technologists there who would be impacted by the design that is going to now be implemented. And it all started with this is the design that implements the requirements.
Hmm.
Do we all understand what the requirements are? Like, do we all understand specifically what data is involved, what processes or workflows are impacted, and so on? And that's where basically the handoff between the business analyst, they had those requirements documented. They went out and elicited them um, by interviews, documentation review, expert knowledge, etc. Got them lined up for the team, and then the team carries on with their pieces of the implementation.
I love it. I love it. Awesome. And so you had mentioned that, I mean, obviously in the beginning, you had mentioned the checklist for planning business analysis. Did you want to
Yes.
kind of get into a little bit about that?
Yeah, so think of it this way. Business analysts, they have their skills. I have my skills as a project manager. Our developers have their skills, etc. We all have really good, strong skills. As a business analyst coming into a project to help us, um, most business analysts become business analysts because primarily they're very good communicators. And many of them are good at communicating and asking questions and
Mm,
documenting things. Many of them become business analysts because they've actually been in the operations of a company for a while. And people
right.
look at them and they say, well, you know how things work around here. Why don't you document it? So, primarily business analysts come with great communication skills. So we call them in and say, well, go figure out what the requirements are and help us. Da, da, da. Think of that from the perspective of any form of a trusted advisor. I
Hmm.
trust you because you can communicate with me. You can help us out. You can document things. You can help our team move forward. Whatever the scope of work for the consultant, and it's this similar kind of a pattern for a business analyst. So you've got great skills in communication, but there's some constraints. Although one project may look like the same, or the services you're providing or the role you're playing may look the same from one project to the next, the number one test question for PMI is what is a project? And the answer is it's a unique temporary endeavor. So even if you're very good at doing what you do, anytime you come into a new project or a new engagement, you're going to be facing, even though it's very similar and you're tending to follow the same methods as you have in prior projects, every project has its unique dynamics.
100%.
And so it's really a good idea to get off on the right foot. Um, you might just sort of show up, but highly competent business analysts will take the discipline of doing some planning ahead of time so
Mm,
that they're able to anticipate those dynamics and adjust what they're going to do so that they can best serve the project. That's
right.
what business analyst analysis planning is all about.
Right. And I really do feel like it's because of this rigor that would set the average from the very competent apart, in that if you have a set of tried and true, gold standards to which you would adhere, then there's very little that's going to fall through the cracks, or there's no, oh, we should have done this and we didn't, because you've got that
Yeah.
something
I'd
to
like to
rely
tailor
upon.
what you just said a little bit and
Hmm.
jump to the end of this, which is what's the benefit of business analysis planning?
I love it.
Okay.
Please do.
So I'm a great business analyst. I know what I'm doing. I know this business. I've seen this before. Um, uh, what business analysis planning? So that's the fixed part of it. But the fact is, you're facing a unique temporary endeavor known as a project or some form of engagement. Um,
Hmm.
the benefit of doing a little bit of this planning up front, it's a little bit like buying insurance. It will not take very much time, but it will help you to align your core competencies to what that project needs, that unique
Hmm.
engagement needs. Doesn't mean you have to relearn everything or learn new things or whatever. You're going to apply your skills, but you're going to tailor how you apply them to that unique endeavor known as a project. And it will help
100%.
the project and you gain the most value from the valuable time that you are going to spend so that there are fewer misinterpretations, fewer missed expectations, better application of your skills and management of risks in your role in the project. So it's like
Hmm.
buying insurance. It doesn't take very long at all, and that's why we call it a checklist. We just want to
Hmm.
be a little bit diligent upfront to sort of say, have I thought of this? Have I thought of this? And how will I just adjust what I'm going to do to accommodate those dynamics?
Right, right. So what does this checklist entail?
Okay, so um, there are about five areas where these dynamics occur in any project. Five types of dynamics. And I'd like to maybe question you, Kat. I'm going to list the five, and I might ask you whether you think each of these dynamics is of very high importance,
Hmm.
medium importance, or low importance, or
Mhm.
maybe very high, high, and medium. Everything
You're
is
putting me to
important,
the
right?
test.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So, how important do you think the project's life cycle is on on the outcome of your work? In other words, are you, you know, the methodology or the life cycle that a project will go through, or the phases that a client might be asking you to advise them on or take them through,
Like the
like
phases meaning waterfall versus agile, or the
something
phases
like that.
meaning
Yes.
requirements gathering versus UAT versus that.
Well, those phases that you just mentioned can be part and parcel of a waterfall methodology. They might be phases, or they might be activities that are concurrently going on during an agile approach. Fine.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But the project has some end goal and it has
Yep.
some starting point, and it probably has some checkpoints along the way. And I think you
Mm-hmm.
nailed it. There is a life cycle there, and there's some terms that we're commonly familiar with. Either these five sprints or these three
Mm-hmm.
phases,
Mm-hmm.
etc. So,
Yep.
how important is your knowledge? How much of an impact is your knowledge of the life cycle of a project that you're engaged in? How important is that to you?
The knowledge of the life
Your
cycle. Okay.
understanding of the life cycle.
Um, I mean, I feel like it's kind of inherent to me at this point in time. If I did not know the project life cycle, I think it would be quite like it would make my job very hard. I think it would be essentially at least a medium to a high. And the other perspective I can answer this question is in terms of the type of project. So, for example, an ERP project versus a website development project or a mobile app project, one of
Mhm.
which is it's really hard to do one of these with an agile type project being the ERP, right? Because
Yes.
so from that perspective, like the way the type of project, whether or not it's agile or waterfall, is extremely important to the outcome or the success of the outcome. Um,
Perfect.
so in general, at least a medium, probably high.
Thank you. I think you answered it correctly. Before we dig into that, there are four more areas I would like to take a reading off of you
Aren't I
for.
supposed to be interviewing you?
The
I'm
deliverable
just joking.
schedule or effort budget.
Okay.
So, the last time we talked about product orientation. So I
Mhm.
would look at some resources on my team and ask them to prepare certain products. How important do you think, as an advisor or a consultant or a resource on a project, how important is the deliverable schedule, or just call it the schedule and the effort budget? Very high importance, high importance, medium importance.
To me, as a contributor on a project, they are two independent items. The schedule is very much very important to me. The effort of budget is, I really pay no attention to the effort budget because I do what I need to do to deliver the end product
Mhm.
by the schedule that is required.
Okay.
So I can't really answer that in like together. So schedule, super important. Effort budget, not my problem.
Okay. That in itself might be a question I might want to ask you a bit more about, but anyway, that's
Okay.
good. Okay. How about the project stakeholders and the relationships to you as someone engaged in this initiative? How important are
Oh,
they?
oh, 100% super important. Because it is the relationships that you develop on a project with those stakeholders that is going to determine how much you understand their perspective, you understand what their pain points are, and you understand you basically, I wanted to say this earlier, but as a business analyst, I feel that my one of the most important things that I contribute to the project is being that advocate on behalf of the business.
Perfect.
So, yes.
That's dynamic number three, and I think you'd agree they differ and vary from each engagement. Okay,
Mhm.
perfect. There's two more. How important are organizational assets, such as whatever specialized tools you use, prior work, training? You mentioned
Um,
SAP, so there might be some reusable assets that an SAP consultant uses. There might be some other things
oh,
that the enterprise uses or provides
hmm
to its
yeah,
employees or project team members that they assume they will leverage. How important
yeah.
are those assets?
I mean, as an external consultant, I really do have my own assets. So, it's a combination between me bringing my asset, like my tools and assets
Hmm.
to and tools can be not only templates, but also like software tools that I just bring
Yeah.
to the table that I don't have to rely on the client
Mm.
tools. But I mean, they're quite important. I feel like it's again, this is something that's inherent to me. So,
Yes.
but if I
Perfect.
didn't have them, I would be, it would make my job a lot harder for
You
sure.
might not be as trusted of an advisor as you otherwise would
100%.
be. Okay, so
Yes,
I got a
correct.
sense that they're important, but
They
maybe
are
not
quite
quite as high
important.
as the interpersonal and so on. But we'll come back to that.
But I think it's also because I just assume that I always have it, so it's never a problem. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
And the reason for us talking is you're an expert at what you do. I'm an expert at what I do, and we want to share some of our tips and techniques, right? So for those
Hmm
who might be kind of like new to some of these topics or whatever, we just want to make sure that are you thinking of these things? And these are important factors. So I can appreciate that you
Truth.
personally are expert in certain areas or, are fully covered in some areas. And that's the reason for doing this planning or checklist. One more area your personal competencies and knowledge. How important is that?
That is
Because we
super
all have our
important.
own unique skills, training, etc. How important is your own personal competency and knowledge?
It's 100% super important, but I want to also qualify that by saying just because you know something, it doesn't mean you know it. So there's the competency of being resourceful and be coming from a place of humility when going into a new client or organization. You can't assume that, what you know is the be all and end all. And
Right. So
but
great.
yes,
So I
very
agree.
important.
I think I heard you say it's very important. And
Hmm
again, for the benefit of our listeners, we all have our own unique strengths and weaknesses. Some of us are more senior in our career. Some of us are more experienced or have had better training or whatever. And some of us are a little nervous or unsure, right? So there's nothing wrong with assessing that and playing to your strengths as you go forward and avoiding those areas or perhaps, being a little careful in the areas that you're a little weak in. So, with our remaining time, I'd like to zero in on maybe just a couple of those important areas that you ranked as important. They're highly important. Perhaps, one of them was the project stakeholders and relationships. And the second one probably was your personal competencies and knowledge. So the point of going through a BA planning checklist or a checklist like this is to just dig a little further and quickly assess how is ask some question, answer some questions that will help you to tailor how you're going to do your forthcoming work based on an understanding of where you lie in your own personal competencies and knowledge, for example, and in the project stakeholders that you're currently encountering or about to encounter and their relationships. So
hmm
let's go to project stakeholders and relationships. I just like to
Sure.
generally check off on these in my mind. You don't have to write them down. In depending on some folks or environments that BAs might actually write this down. So let me ask you a couple of questions, Kat. Project stakeholders and relationships. Do you know the key roles on this project, on the project team, the current project team you're working on, or a recent one, or the one you're about to go into? And maybe your listeners can ask themselves these questions. Do you know the key roles on the project team and who is in them?
Yes. Yes, I do.
Give me an example of one of the roles. Don't name a person, but it's a key role on your project.
Well, obviously the PM, the change manager,
Perfect.
the project sponsor.
Beautiful.
Hmm
So in your own mind, you probably can envision these people.
Mm-hmm.
And the other side of the project stakeholders and relationships question is, what is the relationship between you and them? And what are the
Mm-hmm.
relationships among each other?
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, are you in an environment where the project sponsor is very engaged and accessible,
Mm-hmm.
possibly even micromanaging? Are you in an environment where, these functions or these stakeholders are in stovepipes, or they collaborate, are you in an environment where they haven't even met before this project?
Mm, right.
If they haven't even met, how would that adjust or cause you to tailor what you're about to do next?
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
otherwise, or they're working like a machine already, and you're just sort of plugging into that. So you can see how that might influence how you think about how you'll move forward with what you have to do.
For sure, for sure.
So,
Even something answering, like getting the answers to a simple question might be very difficult if these folks don't have, a good or close working relationship.
yes, are there
Hmm.
politics, et cetera, et cetera?
Exactly.
I've been
I
in
mean, there's always
environments,
politics,
yeah,
right? But
I've been in environments where the project itself forces new relationships. It brings in executive from the C-suite to be down on the floor with, uh, people from the operations, and generally there might be some, they might not have ever communicated before, or
Mhm.
there might be some level of intimidation, et cetera. So these are some of the barriers you might encounter. Knowing that, whether you formally break down those barriers or build those relationships, just knowing that that exists will help you to adjust your day-to-day actions. You might
Love
even
it.
suggest some activities, team building, on a small scale, right? Uh,
Hmm.
uh, and part and parcel of that I like to ask in this domain is, or this dynamic is, so for example, who's new to each other on this team?
Hmm.
Sometimes you're working with teams that are doing the same thing over and over again. They're very familiar, and sometimes it's new, people that are new.
Hmm.
Are there local team members and remote team members? That might influence how you communicate or do some of your work. Do you understand the responsibilities of those team members? Like, in other words, is everyone just doing everything at the same time, or do they have specific roles in the projects and responsibilities for certain products? And it doesn't mean that you have to have a different person for every responsibility. It means just, do you know who the change management resource is versus the project manager, and that they
Right.
have those different roles? Or is the same person playing the two roles? That kind
Yeah.
of thing.
Yeah, and very often it's going to be a collaborative effort between many people, but there's always one point person to what we were speaking about the previous time. You have a product owner,
Yeah.
right? Hmm.
And that leads to the last question in the area of project stakeholders and relationships. Apart from what are their roles, and what are their relationships? Are they new relationships? Are they comfortable, et cetera? What can you do about that? One of the last questions is, again, in a me being a product oriented kind of project manager, I'm always interested in who's approving each of the products, or who's approving that the work that we've completed is complete. And so one of the things you want to ask is, who is responsible for producing? That's usually clear. And accepting, or needs to be consulted or informed for each of these products. And ultimately, that helps you to understand, who do we need to bring in?
Mm. Yeah,
Who needs to sign off on this? Do they need to sign off at all? Do they just need to sort of be apprised, et cetera? So, what are the sort of the racy responsibilities, responsible,
hmm,
consulted, informed kind of thing, among these team members? And that
right.
way, you kind of get a feel for, who do I need to go to when? Who do I need to bring in and invite to what, because of their role
Hmm.
and where they are.
So just before you go on, RACI, can you level set with our audience what RACI would stand for?
It's a project management term.
Mhm.
It's an acronym for assigning responsibilities. Who is responsible? Who can
Mhm.
be consulted? Who needs to be, let's see, who is accountable?
Uh-huh.
Responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed.
Right.
So you
And
might
then
be,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Oh, I was
And
just gonna say, so normally this is a matrix, right? So you've
yes,
got like your RACI across the top, and then what do you have on the, I guess on the, for each row? Would it be like, I think it's like your products, right? Like your internal projects products.
100%. In a product-oriented approach, your life cycle of your project will have a series of, as you call them, projects that all contribute
Hmm.
towards the goal.
Hmm.
If you imagine that every one of those products should be completed, well, it's a simple question. They are the rows, and across the top, whose name am I going to put in the responsible column for each of
Right.
these? Whose names would I include in a consulted column? Um, Accountable and informed. Accountable is typically who's going to approve it or sign it off if it needs to be approved or signed off. And informed are, who are the other stakeholders who we want to share this information with. It's
100%. I
funny.
call it the who should care matrix.
Yes. And the ones that are really important for me are responsible and consulted, and
Hmm.
then accountable. So you know, you just want to very quickly sort of check off on those questions. If you can't answer those questions, that's one thing. You might need to do a little bit more elicitation and or conversation or thinking.
Hmm.
If you know the answers, great. You're very comfortable in the environment that you're about to step into, and you're probably aware of some of the danger zones and or additional activities perhaps you might think of to help the team overcome uh, their relationships that may not already have. You've heard of storming, norming, and performing. So
Hmm.
on any project, if you bring together a number of people, even if they're all experts, being aware of their relationships as they come into the team and whether or not they're already performing or whether or not you need
Hmm.
to speak to them carefully or help them along. This is all sort of tailored by your understanding of the roles and the relationships that you're stepping into.
Right. Right.
I'd like to move on then, maybe. How about what was the second one? Oh, your own personal uh, skills and competencies.
Okay.
You rank them as high. So personal competencies and knowledge. Um, so here are some questions you might ask. Who on the project team has what expert business domain knowledge? Who are you going to turn
SMEs.
to?
Hmm.
Yes. Yeah. Who are they?
Hmm.
In many examples, or cases, it might take you may not know at the start. You may not be told, or you may not be familiar enough with the organization, the team. You just want to ask yourself, do I know who on the project team has what expert domain knowledge? Maybe
Yeah.
it's one person who has all the answers. Maybe it's different functional SMEs that have various components of knowledge. Who are they?
I feel
Uh,
like we have I don't know if you already have this, Ed, but I feel like this is like an idea for a product. But this could be literally a journal for people embarking on products or projects where you have these questions and it's like a diary where they come in and I mean it's probably like a great digital product as well. Like you can just have this, as a part of Microsoft OneNote as an example, and you have
yeah.
all these questions and you like and as you go into the project, you're taking notes on who these SMEs are because you're 100% right. Like each one of these questions is not something that you necessarily, would spend a whole lot of time up front in doing, but it's always in the back of your mind. You
Yes.
always want to have a quick reference. It's kind of like have you heard of I mean, obviously you've heard of Harry Potter, but if you've seen any of Harry Potter's movies, there's a concept of the pensieve, right? And it's just like this collection of knowledge and dreams and thoughts that are in this basin. So,
Yeah. So the key here is we don't want to get too deep into it. We want to buy a little bit of insurance by spending a little bit of time and effort going through these matters so that as we move forward, we're insured that we're not getting too far off base or, we're respectful of certain constraints and so on around relationships, for example, tools, knowledge, etc. So you're
yeah.
right. But I tend not to make it too formal. And this is why I have
Mm,
it as a checklist at processmodelingadvisor.com, especially for business analysts. And it's the same for any role in the project. So it is, you're right, a competent expert in what they're doing or providing to the project, they should be aware of the answers to these questions. But and believe it or not, some people don't even ponder them until they get into a little bit of trouble. And
Right.
if you think about
Yeah.
it at the other end, you look back and you said, think, what didn't work very well on that project? Oh, these people, I talked to the wrong people for these answers, or we didn't have enough domain knowledge in this area,
Yeah.
or I didn't have enough knowledge in that area, or the way
That's right.
my style of communication to that particular role on the project could have been better. So instead of looking backward, you want to look forward and say, what do I need to be aware of? And just check off quickly.
Yep.
So that's a benefit there. Okay,
I
so
love
let's
it.
carry on. Let me
Mhm.
ask you couple more questions about your competencies and knowledge in your own example, and then I think we'll be done. Um, so I asked you who on the team has what expert knowledge and domain knowledge. You have to ask yourself, what is my own business domain knowledge?
Mhm.
So you might come into a business domain and you're just kind of like a white sheet of paper, right? You're
Yeah.
just there to whiteboard and
Mhm.
go get information, and you're not even that familiar with that particular domain. In other
Right.
cases, maybe like yourself, you are an expert in finance and accounting, and in particular some tools or applications or systems, ERPs and so on. So you have a lot of domain knowledge. How can you leverage that? How can you help the rest of your team on? If you were a white sheet of paper, you'd have to be very careful about how you would communicate to some of your project's experts and or subject matter experts or the client, right?
Mhm.
Perhaps you need to bone up or get some training or knowledge about a certain domain before you can even have a conversation with some of these people, like just so
Mhm.
that you understand the terminologies they're using, et cetera, et
That's
cetera.
right. That's right. Would you actually, as part of this, and now I understand this is a checklist, but in your gathering, because when you, as you know, when you go into a project, you're going to acquire a lot of knowledge. And so, of course, you're going to be adding to this what I call a pensive. But would you include, recommend like a personal glossary of items or particular acronyms in an industry in which, especially something that you are not familiar with?
Again, that's a tool that can be
Hmm.
used depending on your environment. If you're going in talking to your colleagues CPAs, you don't have to come up with a glossary of terms for
That's
a
true.
CPA, so
Hmm.
certified
Hmm.
public accountant or whatever. And so it depends again on the environment that you're coming into. I could tell you lots of
Right.
stories about, the various domains and areas where I've gone into and I'm very strong, but I
Hmm.
need to be respectful of the fact, for example, in project management, some people don't even care. They don't want to know. They just want the results, right? So I have to
Right.
tailor my conversations that way. Or if I go into, let's say, an accounting space or some other functional space, engineering or whatever, even medicine or something like that, I have to be able to speak to them in their terms. And
That's right.
therefore, perhaps my
In their
domain
language.
knowledge,
Hmm.
if it's not up to snuff, maybe it tells me I need to do some work above and
Hmm.
beyond to as I move forward. Here are some other questions. What are your strongest core competencies? Don't need to tell me them all because I
Mine
know you.
specifically?
Yeah, but you should think of them. Yeah, what do you like? You need to think about what are your strengths
Okay. Hmm.
and can you leverage those strengths or how do you leverage those strengths
Hmm.
on the project you're about to engage? Um, where can you take advantage of your team's diversity of knowledge and competencies? So you don't know it all. You've got some team members. Some of those team members have really good strengths. uh, you know, where can you take advantage of your team's members' strengths and diversities?
Actually, even to understand what they are first is very important as well,
Yeah.
right?
And then as you get rolling, what you'll find is if you respect and acknowledge those diversities and knowledges, you'll
Hmm.
get a lot of runway out of that. Like you'll get a lot of productivity out of that because you can demonstrate some trust in them. And as soon
Yes,
as you demonstrate
exactly.
some trust in them,
Hmm.
they're eager to gain more trust and demonstrate more capability and so
Right.
on.
And people want to shine, and
Yes.
like you give them an opportunity to shine where they are good at shining.
Yes. Whether they've studied that theory or not, that's what's going to happen.
Exactly.
Um, and finally, having seen all that landscape around your team and and knowing your competency, other team members' competency, or after actually, having at least tried to assess it or think about it, as you move forward, who are the best stakeholders to engage in certain activities in your project? Who can you go to for certain either products in your life cycle or communications within your project or collaborations, problem solving, things like that? Who are the people that you can tend to engage
Who are
more?
those go-to
Right.
people? Hmm.
Right. As for example, as opposed to calling a meeting with 10 people to all deal with the same question or whatever, you might just go, you may be a trusted advisor to certain people, but other people might be trusted advisors to you to help solve problems. And by just sort of having assessed your strengths, your weaknesses, the different roles in the project, and being a little bit mindful of it, it's really not doing a whole lot of analysis, but just being a little
Hmm.
mindful of it at the beginning will help you to make, tactical decisions as to who you need to talk to next to get what you need to get done.
And just making your life easier,
That's right.
right?
And also, either not under speaking to somebody or over speaking with
Hmm.
to them with your knowledge or whatever, and adjusting your communication style, things like that.
Right,
So those are
right.
the two areas that we thought were important dynamics, and a little just questioning around, what am I getting into here? And it would
Yep.
help you not to become a different person or different knowledge or whatever. It would tailor some of your tactics as you move forward, just being aware of those dynamics around you.
I feel like if you were to engage upon this, like apply this checklist to whatever role you are in, you don't even have to be on an implementation project necessarily, but even if you're starting a new role, or if you're engaging a new team, or even if you have a new team member, you're starting a new job, as any, in an organization, all
Yeah.
of these dynamics are very ubiquitous and
Yeah.
very valuable to have when you embark on your new item, whatever that may be.
100%. This is not rocket surgery, but what's the benefit then again?
Rocket
Like if,
surgery.
yeah, like
I
if
like
it's
how
so
you put
simple,
rocket.
yeah, yeah, it's not that. So if it's so simple, why are we talking about it? It's just to be aware that again, should just to be a little diligent to kind of ask these kinds of questions before you get
Mhm.
into up to your elbows into whatever that project is or that consultation is or whatever job
Mhm.
you're doing. Just do a little bit of that up front because it is like insurance. It will help you be mindful as you step forward, step by step, as you take that journey of 1,000 steps to whatever you're doing. It will help to tailor, think of it too, it'll help you to tailor what you do. And probably more importantly, it'll keep you out of the weeds or out of the fire kind of thing. You might, unintentionally step into things that you probably, oh, with my knowledge, I think I'll let someone else answer that question or bring them in,
Yep.
engage someone else more, or whatever. So it just helps you to tailor what you already know you're going to do from one engagement to the next.
Yeah, for sure. It's like a set of cheat codes, like going into a video game.
Yeah.
So once again, you had mentioned that this checklist can be found on your website, process modeling advisor.com. And
Yes.
what would we do? Would we just simply search for this
Uh,
checklist, or is
no,
there a?
go to the homepage.
Mhm.
And it's one of the articles that's listed on the homepage. It's also published
Excellent.
in BA Times and Modern Analyst and IRM Connects, which are basically designed for business analysts. But you'll find the article on processmodelingadvisor.com. Read it over, and just you can even generalize it to your own situation and give it a try.
Excellent, excellent. So we will be sure to include the website link in the show notes and also on the YouTube description below. So go ahead and click on that. And of course, Ed has an amazing book that I can't wait to read, actually. It's available on Amazon and it's called Universal, help me out here.
The Universal Process Modeling Procedure, the practical guide to high quality business process models. You can also find a link to it, a little description about it at the site processmodelingadvisor.com. Thank you, Kat.
Excellent, excellent. As usual, I've really enjoyed our conversation. I love how I can't wait to implement this in my own practice as it's going to go into my pensive.
Okay,
Thank you
perfect.
again,
Good to hear.
Ed. Really appreciate your insights.